Welcome to the second video of a playthrough of the game Order and Opportunity, making of the post-Cold War world order on the P500 pre-order list with the GMT games at this moment. In the first video we had the US turn, and now we will go straight into the EU turn. Start with drawing a development card. This is a dramatic card called Non-State Actor Activity. So you remember from the setup we put down a number of these non-state actor counters, ISIS and rogue states and whatnot, and this is a card, and there are two of them in the deck, that brings those counters now to life. They start taking actions against the player sides, and so we go through each space now with such a counter. Let's start here in the Arabian Peninsula, where the US military influence is faced with pressure from the rogue state. There at stake is getting to resolve the Bin Laden world event somewhere down the line for 2 victory points and an extra command, so it's not a small thing. Before we resolve the action of the non-state actor, the US has it will be resolved by the two sides rolling dice against each other. The US may, however, spend resources to generate die roll modifiers. So the US decides to spend 2 resources, going down from 3 to 1, and we get the dice here onto the map, and then proceed to roll them. So the US, having spent 2 resources, gets a +2 die roll modifier. We add the levels of influence in the space. So, and the black die is for the rogue state. So this doesn't look good for the United States. So the die rolls are 1 and 3 for the rogue state. So the math here is the rogue state has got 2 influence levels there, +3 from the die roll, so that's 5. The US got 1 level plus the 2 resources they spent, which gives 3 plus 1 from just 1 from the die roll. So the US will lose this contest. That means the non-state actors remove the US influence in the space. So it's sent here onto the US player mat, and a tension marker is placed down here in the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, so and we move on to the neighboring space, Gulf states, where ISIS and the US economic influence are going head to head there. Same procedure, we get the dice ready, we roll them, and this time the US decided not to spend any resources because they just down to 1 resource, so not too much scope there. Luckily the die rolls went in the US favor, so now the US takes the opportunity to reduce ISIS level by 1, and again a tension marker is also placed into the space. This is potentially a destabilizing marker there, but now this places the US actually in the position to resolve the world event there, having the necessary 2 levels of economic influence there and no longer being blocked by ISIS there. And there's a third space to resolve. This is South Asia with Chinese influence there, going against the pirates. China decides to spend 1, 2, 3 resources. That would be actually too much. Let's go for 2, and then take the dice and roll them. Oh, this looks bad for China. So just 1 for China plus 1. So it's 2 plus 2 resources, 4, and this is then against the pirates with 5 plus 2, so easy win for the pirates. The Chinese influence is gone and tension is placed into the space. There are no further spaces where non-state actors take actions. Here is a non-state actor in Russia, the separatists in Chechnya, but there is no influence they can fight against, so there is no action taken there. So we just discard the non-state actor activity. And we continue the EU turn by passing from the development segment to the opportunity segment. At the game start, the EU is not able to resolve anything, so we simply move into the commands phase. And we can open the EU hand window and see the kind of cards that they draw. At the game start, you have a chance to draw your hand of 5 cards and then take a mulligan if you like, and this is what the EU uses. So they discard one of the economic cards and draw a 5th one again to replace it. That's a cultural card, so that's good. The EU has a good looking hand going into the first command segment, and so the EU has decided to play then these 2 political cards here and proceed to use them how they like. The first one they decide to use here in North Africa to increase economic influence, but actually better to use the other card, namely the rule of law mechanism, because it's got the momentum effect. The momentum effect means if a player uses this card to take an action such that they establish control in a space, then they get an extra command, they maintain or they generate momentum. And so this is what the EU wants to take advantage of here. So they use the card to increase political influence in North Africa to 2, which then takes EU political influence in the space to 2, and that's also the so-called stability value of the space. That means the EU has now control in that space, and so the momentum effect is activated. We go here onto the sequence of play track and put down the command marker there next to the EU cylinder as a reminder that the EU has generated the ability to take a second command later on. This leaves us with the second card and Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel, this card has a so-called reaction ability that the EU can place onto the map. But before that, the EU player is considering whether to advance on the economic development track. They could use this political card to put down an economic influence. How is that possible? Well, because one, and this is actually a fairly recent rules addition, one change that's been made is that you can use cards for an offsuit action, but you have to pay a resource to do so. EU decides against that though, because there's a better use. They go down here into the Middle East and turn the Angela Merkel card sideways to activate, or rather place, not quite yet activate, the Wirtschaft reaction ability. This reaction ability, as shown by these icons here, means the EU will be able to react to economic and cultural actions by other powers to place their own economic influence into the space. And the EU has the command marker, so they don't pass, they just pause and will take actions during the next turn. One last thing we remember to do is we tilt the EU card sideways. The reaction ability is not yet active. It's only active once a power has passed. So there is that trade-off to these placing reactions. So that concludes the EU turn for the time being, and next up we've got China.